Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 14 years, and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But like so many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. So how are you doing, lovely listener? I hope you're having a great November so far. One of the highlights for me so far is the other night I went to an event in a nearby neighbourhood, which is about the local response to the climate and nature crisis. The purpose of the evening was to highlight a lot of the projects and endeavours that are going on around Brighton. We heard from a couple of local councillors, our MP, some sustainability-related business owners, some people working for non-profits, and some campaigners. It was super interesting, and I also found it somewhat heartening, particularly because it was really well attended and they kept having to bring more chairs out. My favourite speakers were a guy who works for a non-profit that attempts to reduce food waste and another who runs a local composting scheme. I definitely plan to find out more about those and attempt to get involved. Notably, there wasn't anyone talking about mending textiles, although I know that there are a few mending initiatives going on in the city. In fact, my colleague and friend of the podcast, Naomi, and I are running a couple of free clothes mending workshops at the beginning of December. The City Council has stumped up some money for some sustainability-related workshops, and I've just heard that ours are fully booked up. We'll be doing some more in the new year, though. I'm looking forward to passing on some skills and helping some people keep their garments in use for longer. Talking of mending, you remember last week I told you that I've started a new system where I mend or alter an item once I've finished a regular sewing project but before I move on to another. It is going so well. This week I finished my Leona sweatshirt, then I mended a hole in the knee of my daughter's tights. Then I made a scrap-busting sweatshirt for my husband from some scraps and leftovers from other projects. That came out super well and he loves it. Once I've got proper pics, I'll post that on my blog and Instagram accounts because, as you know, I'm pretty evangelical about scraps as a useful resource. And then I mended some joggers for my daughter. This system is actually getting things moving out of my mending pile rather than stagnating there. I think it's important to acknowledge that, like laundry, mending will never really be a completed task. But I can't wait till I've whittled it down so much that new mends can be triaged and dealt with almost immediately. In other sustainability news, I've been hitting up Trash Nothing and Freecycle again. So the fabric company that I work for part-time recently moved to a new unit, but it's taken a while to sort out the area where the staff eat their lunch. I have the role of sustainability coordinator there, and a few of us decided to see what we could get second-hand. I found a set of padded dining chairs via the Trash Nothing app, which, as I've mentioned before, is basically a digest that helps you keep an eye on a number of different local Freecycle and Freegal groups at the same time, without having to sign into each of them. Our bosses went to collect them in their car, and now we have a set of chairs that are a vast improvement on the rickety, uncomfortable seats that we were previously perched on. Next up is to try and find a better table. Are you a member of any Freecycle or Freegal groups? Have you had any excellent scores from your local one lately? Or have you offered up anything to keep it in use for longer? This week I want to say a big thanks to Jennifer and Louise, who are the newest patrons of the podcast. They signed up via Patreon to offer their generous and greatly appreciated monthly support. If you want to help keep this podcast going and are in a position to do so, please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread. So let's chat about today's episode. It's with return guest and knitting expert Saskia de Feijter. So basically, I'm pretty much at the beginning of my knitting journey. I've knitted a headband and a couple of very basic garments so far, but without thinking too much about the yarn I was buying, other than if it was suitable for the pattern and if it contained any non-biodegradable fibres. But going forward, I really want to make conscious choices about yarn and try to select stuff that is more sustainable, ethically produced and supports local businesses, on top of it being suitable for my pattern and biodegradable. Previously, I recorded a great episode with Saskia about how to knit more sustainably. That's episode 48. That taught me a lot, but I was struggling to put what she told me into practice as I started planning my next knitting project. I had questions. Saskia was kind enough to shoehorn me into a particularly busy week, and we had a really fun and illuminating chat, and it answered those questions and gave me a clearer view on what I should be looking for. If you are in any way interested in yarn crafts, or you think you may get into it in the future, get your ears ready. Enjoy.
Let's go.
Okay, so I've got half an hour of your time. Let's go. I have written some questions because I'm a professional, but I'm not a professional because I've actually written them on my laptop, which I'm looking at you at. So that's really good. I'm going to just quickly, yeah, there we go. Here they are. You can't see me now. I can't see you.
I loved how you took out your notebook and then you're like, yes, I've written them on my computer.
Okay, right. I'm going to do this. Ready?
All right. I don't know if I'm ready.
Yes, you are. Of course you are. You're born for this.
Bring it.
So, you have previously been on the Check Your Thread podcast, and we have had a lovely discussion about various factors involved in knitting more sustainably. True or false?
True.
Very true. So, fine. So, I guess I am struggling a little bit with putting that into practice as I plan my new knitting project. So I'm going to tell you the situation I'm at, and then I'm going to just let you respond and make it all okay.
No pressure there.
It's fine. Okay, so I have identified a real gap in my wardrobe for a properly warm knitted cardigan.
Check.
So I've gone on Ravelry and I found a pattern that I really like the look of. I think it's kind of like a level up from my skills now, but not beyond the realms of possibility. So I think it's a good pattern. So now I'm trying to choose some yarn and I'm hitting a bit of a wall.
Okay.
So I am looking for something that is ethical for people and animals as far as possible, that hasn't traveled around the entire globe, that will create a long-lasting garment and is affordable, and probably most importantly actually suits the pattern that I want to make. So from what you've told me so far, I know to look for the country of origin and or country of processing. I know to avoid mulesing and to check if there's any synthetic fibres in the yarn, because one day I want it to biodegrade. And obviously I'd like to support a small business rather than a large chain if possible. And I think I also need you to talk me through ply again and what that means for longevity. So, and also on top of that, I've looked at the yarn recommendations on the pattern on Ravelry, and some of them are cheap yarn brands that you've warned me off, and some are lovely yarns from single country that are eye-wateringly expensive. So can a compromise be found? How do you make a compromise? I'm scared of wasting a load of money, and ultimately, I think probably the most sustainable thing is to have a garment that actually you're going to wear. So I am trying to find a sustainable answer to my situation.
Yes, gotcha. All right. This is typically one of those things where if the person that knows what the actual world of knitting is like when it comes to sustainability, that would be me. I kind of know what to do, and I came to this place through a journey. You are at the beginning of that journey. Yes. And now I need to figure out if I want to take you away from that journey and put you right where I am, which could be really like disrupting. And I'll tell you why in a bit. Or I could just say, this is part of the journey, and I give you a little bit of small tips and you can kind of build on that. But I've come to know you a little bit. I know how important sustainability is for you. And so I think I'd be safe in ripping you out of your journey and dropping you in the reality.
Yeah, let's fast track this.
Okay, fast track. So the thing is with yarns, as it is with fabrics, and we talked about this already, it's complicated. First of all, if you need yarn that is friendly for animals, find that non-mulesing, those words on the label or on the website. That's important, but that will usually only be when you're talking about merinos.
Oh.
So local yarn's always good. In your case, if it's British yarn, you'll be fine. So that's a huge, fast way to just get that out of the way. Look for yarn that's from your country. You are very privileged in the way that the UK is a country that offers a lot of knitting yarn and brands compared to the Netherlands.
Okay.
Not necessarily compared to the US or even Italy, but the US has a lot of native yarns and sheep. But what also happens, and we did talk about that, is that yarn gets shipped all over the world. It gets spun here, dyed there. At first, it gets harvested here, and then all of the other things.
A lot of people are saying that they're from like Peru and South America. Do I want to be avoiding that really? Because that's like a big journey.
Well, yes and no, because for as far as I know, mulesing is not done in South America.
Okay.
So if you find merino or yarns, usually they call it Highland wool, which is basically kind of a generic term for yarns from Peru. I don't even know why, but I've seen that happen quite a lot. That's kind of safe when it comes to animal welfare, safe-ish, but then it has to travel. So why don't we just skip all of that and focus on British yarns, right?
Okay.
Because you live there, so that's great. I mean, if you're in the mainland, then you have to deal with the taxes and all of that Brexit crap, but you don't. So that's where you are, and we're talking about your problem. So then, now we know you have a pattern that you like the design of, and we know a space where to look for yarns. This pattern calls for a specific yarn. And can you describe what it looks like to us, the design?
The design is a cardigan. It kind of has a raglan sleeve thing. I think you knit it from the top down. It doesn't have any fastenings. It's got quite nice kind of volume in the sleeves and in the body. And I believe it's made from chunky yarn that looks a bit fluffy.
Okay. Now, here's where I go knit nerd annoying on you.
That's what I need.
Because this is the type of project that really appeals to the beginner knitter, because it has this kind of a fashion look about it. It's chunky, so
I will definitely wear it. It's totally on my wheelhouse style wise.
Yes, okay, so that's great. That's lovely. Love that. But here's the big but. The thing is that this kind of chunky look means that large stitches with a thick yarn is going to be heavy, and heavy will drape.
It's not as chunky as the other ones that I was showing you.
There's always something worse, obviously. Hold on.
It's chunky as in the type of yarn chunky.
Yes. So, but I'll get into that. I know where you're going. And the thing is, what designers do to kind of lift that heaviness is the yarn is not particularly the same size as the needle. So what I mean by that is the yarn is less chunky than the needle that you knit it with.
Okay.
So that means that you have a little air in your stitches.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So that makes it's not tight knit.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little lighter and a little less droopy, both of those things. And what they also need to do is then think about the yarn in terms of what fiber to use and how can it be as lightweight as possible. Now, wool is a lot lighter than, let's say, cotton or linen. That would be a really bad idea. But we're not going there. That's kind of clear. So wool is kind of light as it is, but it still needs to be lighter. So they use a thinner yarn and either pair it up with a mohair, something that's fluffy, so that the fluff will fill in those spaces. Otherwise, you look like you're wearing a net.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's like a fabric without holes because of the fluff, and it's lightweight. Or they will use a yarn, and I'm talking if you're a good designer, if you know these things. There's lots of people out there that have just started knitting and like, I'm going to be a designer, and then cheering them on, and they have their own journey to take. But that sometimes you can fall flat on your face with those ideas. But I wish you well if you're listening. So you're either the combination thinner yarn and fluffy yarn, or what they call like a chain yarn. It's almost like a crocheted tube
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all also very lightweight. Then you can look at the combination of, is it alpaca with mohair and wool? Because usually it's a mix of things. And I think lots of people are listening now, that why doesn't she just use the yarn that the pattern asks for? Because that might not be the most sustainable solution. Right? So you have the pattern that you love. I'm saying find a better pattern. You're saying, but I love this one. And we now know that we need to find a good matching yarn in the UK. That's where we are. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're going to go to the pattern. We're going to look at the swatch, at the gauge, and at the needle size. And here's where I draw a line when people say, but I want to do it my way. Especially if if you ask me the question, I'm like, no, you need to knit that swatch. There's no way around it, especially when you're moving things around. If you want to have a garment that will last, if you want to have something that fits and that you can wear, being the most sustainable solution to actually have something to wear, then you have to knit the swatch. And when you do work with Ravelry, because not everyone can, because the way the site is made is not great for everyone, but that's a whole different story. But if you use Ravelry, one of the great things is that you can see what kinds of yarns other people have used at the design page. So that's a thing you can do. It will show you what thickness or what weight the yarn is that is used. And so that will give you a range to look for yarns. If it says, let's say it says chunky, right? Or bulky, chunky. Chunky. If you don't know what that means, you can go to the Yarn Council.
Yes.
And it has a standard yarn weight system. And that's where you can find how many stitches are in 10 centimeters or 4 inches connecting to that weight of yarn. That will give you more information. So when you go into a shop and you want to figure it out all by yourself, then you can look to that and find a yarn that matches those criteria. So find a yarn that's lightweight, either wool or one of those chain things, or a combination of floof and lighter weight, and look at the different elements that you need from that yarn. So, okay, we're focused on British yarns. You can Google British yarns and you'll find websites that give you different brands. There's different wool shops that focus on British yarns. That's kind of just a Google party or an Ecosia party.
It's an Ecosia party.
Yeah, that's when you get closer and closer. You can always ask the nice person in the yarn shop, if you go to an actual yarn shop, to help you out. Like in any shop, not all yarn shop owners have a really broad, or owners will have, but people that work there might be new or don't have that experience. Then you should really point them to these 2 podcasts and say, okay, I'm going to figure it out. Thank you very much. And I think we're getting close, right?
Yeah, definitely. That is a really good start. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm thinking, did I miss something here?
The only thing I need you to go through again is ply and what that means.
Okay, right. So yarn thicknesses is so interesting, especially let's look at sock weight yarn. So that's the thickness of yarn that you use for knitting socks. That is called either 4-ply, sock weight, fingering weight, very interesting. In the beginning, there was just 1 ply, and the ply got doubled to make a thicker knit. So that's double knits, DK. And it kind of evolved in different places in different ways. And so when we talk about plies, it's the amount of threads a yarn is made up of. And you can have a 12-ply that is a worsted weight, or you could have a 3-ply that is a worsted weight. It just means that the plies are thicker. So,
for example, I've got some yarn here.
You can turn that clock anti-clockwise ply-wise.
Is it possible that it's literally just one ply? Because it just looks like fibres.
Yeah, that's one ply.
Oh.
Yeah. And that is one of exactly. This is one of those yarns that when it's a one ply and when it's made up of just the fibers and when it's short fibers, merino has really short staple length is what we call it.
Yeah.
And if you twist the yarn and it's made from loose fibers, the more you twist it, the more the loose fibers will get encapsulated in the strand. So the fibers will not stand out as much.
Yeah.
When the fiber
not going to get so many bubbles.
Exactly. That's where you get the pills from. Because if you rub over it or your sleeve hits the side of your body, that's where you get the most of those. And that's because of the fibers that stick out.
Yeah.
Now, that's not necessarily bad. If it's a 100% wool yarn, that will eventually stop. So don't throw away your clothes because they pill too much. Just take them off gently with one of those razors. That's the best thing. And then wait for it to stop because it will felt together and it will stop. But if you have yarn that's too loose and a one ply and it's knit loosely as well, and this is what happens with these kinds of designs, then it will not be, yes, exactly. She's showing us another project that she's working on, and it's exactly that kind of yarn. You will find that if you wear it a lot, it will make a lot of pills and it will not be as solid and proof.
So the higher the ply, the less likely it is to bubble.
Yes, and not only bubble, but also tear and wear. And so high plies and tight knitting, tighter than in this case, is going to make your garments last a lot longer.
Right, okay.
So that's why people that have knit for a while will usually not knit these types of garments because they know I'm putting in the work. I want to make it last.
Okay, but I'm on my journey.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've quickly got a couple of smaller questions.
Yes.
This is a section of this episode that I'm going to call Phoebe Asks. So Phoebe is my colleague at Fabric Godmother, and she is at the very beginning of her knitting journey, and she has some questions for you. Phoebe wants to know, is there such thing as dead stock yarn? So in sewing, there is such thing as dead stock fabric. So presumably yarn that, at least in theory, has been left over from production of ready-to-wear garments. And if so, how or where do you buy it?
Okay, there is, but you hardly ever see it. I know of one business that sells it. They are two lovely Belgian men or people that sell it in Belgium, and they are called Bart and Frances. And so we'll have to look up that website and share it with you. And they typically go to fairs and sell their dead stock yarns there. You get really cool stuff from there. They get it from fashion shows, stuff like that. So I've got some glow in the dark yarns, which is probably really bad for everything, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, there's no way you couldn't buy it.
I got it a while ago.
Amazing.
But they have some interesting things, yeah.
Awesome. So Phoebe also wants to know, what is the best method for caring for your hand knits? So I'm assuming there might be, presumably she's meaning about laundering and storage. Presumably this might be different depending on the fibre.
Okay, I give you the quick one, the quick answer. So Phoebe, there's a lot I can tell you about this, but in short, keep the woolen things you wear outside of dark spaces and in air and movement so the moths don't get to them. Once you go into a season where you don't wear them as much or at all, give them a good wash and get into that later, and then put them away completely closed off.
Do you want to put them in a plastic tub, something like that?
Plastic tubs are best that you can really close. They're not pretty. I've got cotton containers that works. You can find those like unbleached cotton, but if they're really hungry, they'll gnaw through that as well. So, but I think mine have cardboard in them as well, so they can be found, and they're a little bit prettier and a little bit better. So there's different ways, but if you put them away make sure that nothing can get to them, and make sure you put them away clean.
Yeah.
So that's important. Now, about the cleaning, please do not wash your woolens unless you have a puking baby or you spill your coffee. For all other usages during the season, just hang them out to air. It's going to make your stuff last longer.
Awesome. Phoebe's just messaged me some more.
Yes.
So she's saying sustainable fibre. Cotton and bamboo sound like good options, but what about wool and animal fibres? She needs to listen to the other episode, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say cotton and bamboo are necessarily good options. I would go with linen if you go that route. Linen is much better for the environment.
Is linen better for the environment than wool?
Yes, you could argue that that is true, but it will give you a completely different garment. It's going to be summer
Not
or
really
winter.
comparable.
No, incomparable, I would say.
Okay, cool. Oh, this is a good one. Knitting patterns or types of yarn you can use to make things to be more sustainable in the home, like face cloths and stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, face like cotton pads. You can crochet those. And then you would need cotton, but don't use linen unless you also want to scrub.
Yeah.
Which could be an idea. I love those, but I actually also have those sewn from scraps.
Yeah.
So I think
my mum's given me a couple of like dishcloth things that she's crocheted from some cotton yarn. It's got a bit of it's a bit slightly scratchy. And they're fantastic and they've lasted really well.
Yeah, but does she have she sews.
She sews.
So I would choose sewing for that.
Okay.
But I love to knit from hand towels as gifts as well.
That's a nice idea. What kind of yarn would you use for that?
Nowadays, I would go for linen because it's just really pretty and it becomes prettier over time. It's a pain to knit with, to be honest, because it's really not comfortable. The end result is really beautiful.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thank you. What do you do with leftover yarn?
We were talking about that in
with scrap projects and stuff.
Yeah. And one of my community members had a really cool website about it. But you can even in Ravelry, when you use the search term scrap busting, then there's lots of different ideas and Pinterest is full of them. What I do is I usually use them to darn my socks or patch my elbows, things like that. And this is a good one. My oldest daughter had just had her 15th birthday, and me and my youngest daughter made a lot of pom-poms and dressed up her chair with the pom-poms.
Oh, nice.
Now we're going to tie them onto a ribbon and it's going to be bunting.
Fantastic. Awesome. I was thinking, if you end up, over time, would it be a good plan to kind of store your leftovers in type, like, for example, Aran or Chunky or DK or whatever, and then combine them? Because I love that look of garments that are kind of striped with different types of yarn.
Yeah. Can you still hear me? Because I'm grabbing something. I've got them in plastic tubs and I have them organized color-wise. So,
does that make it, how do you then combine it? If I was to make, say I wanted to make then a scarf that was all a mismatch.
This is going to be a mismatched thing anyway. So the needle size will decide the thickness of the stitch.
Oh, okay.
So you will have more holy pieces or less.
So it doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily have to just only use all kind of chunky.
It depends on what you want. If you go with the flow, it could be nice and messy. Yeah. I just like them with color because I just love the sight of it. And I've sold yarn for a decade. I can eyeball the thickness. So I can just go rummage through them and find the same thickness if I need to.
Right.
In all honesty, I'm still thinking of good projects to use them with. It's an ongoing thought in my mind because the scruffy look can be really cool, but it's a fine line between meh or that's awesome.
Well, you've got a lot of lovely yarn there to work with. You could come up with a really nice color combo.
Yeah, this is just one.
Amazing. Can you vegetable dye hand knit garments?
Yes, you can.
Do you do the finished garment or would you do the yarn first?
I would do the yarn first, or I buy the yarn from somebody that does that dyeing.
Yeah.
Support them if it's not that's another journey. Like learning how to dye is another thing. If you want to do that, it's awesome. Do it, go for it, learn and enjoy, and then dye the yarn first and then knit, I would say.
An episode for that.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna wrap up Phoebe Asks section. Thank you, Phoebe, for those awesome questions. They were great.
Great, Phoebe. Thanks.
If you have any more, let me know and I'll ask Saskia next time. Well, this has been very illuminating and I feel emboldened to go on a cozier party and try and find suitable yarn from the UK, and I'll let you know what I find.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!